Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive?
Always.
All right, awesome. Today we're tackling Stephen Covey, specifically win-win and synergy from his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing is we've got excerpts of Covey himself talking about these ideas, so it's like we're getting a personal lesson straight from the source.
That's amazing.
It is. So right off the bat, something that struck me is how Covey emphasizes that win-win isn't just some kind of negotiation tactic or something.
Yeah.
He says it's like a complete paradigm shift,
hmm
in how we approach every interaction we have.
It totally is. What really gets me is how he emphasizes that win-win is not about just splitting the pie, right? It's about creating a world where everyone actually benefits.
It's about expanding the pie.
Expanding the pie. I love that.
Okay, so let's break down how we actually build this win-win world.
Yeah.
Covey talks a lot about character.
Yes.
He says things like integrity, maturity, and an abundance mentality are just crucial. And that sounds pretty deep, right? Like, is it really that important to have your inner compass sorted before you can even try for a win-win?
It really is. Think about it like this. Like, you can't build a really solid house on, like, shaky ground. And it's those character traits that are the foundation.
I see. Okay.
They're the foundation for the trust and the cooperation that's absolutely required for win-win.
Okay. So you're saying if someone's always like cutting corners or trying to like manipulate others, they're probably not going to be very successful at creating these win-win situations.
Exactly. Because win-win, like true win-win, is about mutual benefit, not just getting what you want
Right.
at the expense of somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And Covey also talks about high trust relationships. Like these are the fertile ground for win-win, right?
Absolutely.
But what about those relationships that are where trust has been broken? Like can win-win even still be possible if there's like baggage?
It's definitely a lot more challenging, but I don't think it's impossible.
Okay. Covey actually believes that even in those situations, we can start making small deposits in the emotional bank account.
Deposits. Okay, now I'm picturing like actually handing someone like a metaphorical check.
Right. More like showing genuine courtesy and respect.
Okay.
Even when it's difficult, really trying to understand the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
Even acknowledging past hurts and just demonstrating a willingness to rebuild over time.
So it's not about like pretending the past didn't happen.
No.
But it's about showing that you're willing to move forward.
Right.
In a better way.
In a more positive way, yes.
Okay.
And that takes patience and commitment.
From both sides.
From both sides, yeah.
Covey also, he's big on clear agreements as part of this win-win framework.
Yes, he is.
He talks about defining desired results, guidelines, resources, accountability, and consequences.
Right.
It almost sounds like you're like drawing up a contract.
It does.
Is all that really necessary, though, for like every interaction? It might not need to be that formal in every single case, but the principle is really important, I think. Because having these clear expectations up front, like having this shared understanding of what success looks like, it creates a much smoother path towards win-win.
So it's about reducing like ambiguity.
Yes.
Making sure everyone's on the same page.
On the same page from the start.
Right from the beginning.
And actually, Covey shares this great example of this in action with a banking institution, I think it was.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that. I love hearing about how, like, organizations are using this stuff.
Yeah, so they completely revamped their whole management training program.
Wow.
And they shifted it from this traditional, like, top-down approach to a learner-controlled model.
Interesting.
And it was built on win-win agreements.
Okay.
So each participant had a really clear understanding of the desired outcomes, the resources that were available to them, and the criteria for success.
And how did that go? Like, were there good results?
The results were amazing, actually. The trainees completed the program in way less time, and they demonstrated a much deeper understanding of everything.
That's incredible. So it was like a win-win for like both the individual and the company.
Totally.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've got character, relationships, agreements.
Right.
What about this idea of synergy?
Synergy.
Is it just like a fancy word for teamwork?
I mean, it's definitely about teamwork, but it goes deeper than that.
Oh.
Covey defines it as, he says, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And it's this idea that when people actually work together effectively, they can create something really extraordinary, something that they never could have done on their own.
Okay. Can you give me an example of synergy in action?
Yeah, think about a musical group.
Okay.
So each musician, they bring their own talent and skill to the group, right?
Yeah.
And so a drummer alone they can make a rhythm, a bassist can play a melody.
Right.
But when they come together and they're guided by this shared vision, they create a symphony.
Oh, that's a great
I
analogy.
love that one.
I love that. So if we want to create that kind of magic in our own lives, where do we even start?
Covey says that the key is empathic listening.
Okay. Empathic listening.
Yes.
I feel like I hear that phrase everywhere,
Oh, me too.
but I'm not always sure what it really means. Is it just about, like, being a good listener?
I think it definitely involves being a good listener,
Okay.
but it's way more than that.
Okay. So what's the more than that part?
Okay, well, Covey challenges this really common assumption that we listen to understand.
Mhm.
But he actually says very often we listen with the intent to reply.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're so busy thinking about what we're going to say next
Yeah. Guilty.
that we don't really hear what the other person is actually saying.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Like, while they're talking, I'm thinking about my next point.
Right.
Okay. So how do we, like, break that habit and become better?
So Covey uses this brilliant analogy to illustrate this. Imagine you go to an optometrist because you're having trouble seeing.
Okay.
But instead of examining your eyes or anything, the optometrist just hands you his glasses.
His own glasses.
His own glasses. And says, here, these worked for me.
Yeah, it would be so ridiculous.
Right. Like, my vision is probably totally different from his.
Totally.
And yet we do that all the time in conversation.
We do. Okay.
We offer solutions or advice before we even understand the other person's perspective.
I see that now. Wow. So if we're not supposed to jump in with solutions, like, what should we be doing?
So Covey outlines these 5 levels of listening.
5 levels.
5 levels.
Okay.
And they all culminate in what he calls empathic listening, which is the highest form.
Okay. 5 levels of listening.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so the first level is ignoring, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then
Yeah.
there's pretending to listen.
Oh, yeah, where you're, like, nodding your head and you're like, uh-huh, but you're not really paying attention. Yeah, especially if someone's talking about something I'm not interested in.
The third level is selective listening.
Okay.
So you only really tune in to the parts that interest you or that confirm your existing beliefs.
That's probably the one I do the most.
Then there's attentive listening, where you're genuinely trying to understand. But even at this level, you're still kind of listening from your own frame of reference.
So you're listening, but you're filtering it through your own experiences.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, we reach the 5th level, empathic listening.
Okay.
This is where you actually try to step into the other person's shoes and see the world from their point of view.
That sounds pretty hard. Like, is it even possible to set aside your own perspective completely and understand someone else's fully?
Covey doesn't say it's easy, but he does believe that it's really essential for creating truly synergistic relationships.
Okay, I'm sold. Empathic listening is important, but how do we actually do it?
Covey talks about this idea of creating psychological air.
Psychological air.
Psychological air. And it's basically making the other person feel safe, understood, and validated.
Okay, so it's not just about the words themselves. It's about the tone of voice, the body language, the whole, like, vibe.
Exactly. And he warns against these 4 common responses that he calls autobiographical responses that hinder genuine understanding, evaluating, probing, advising, and interpreting.
I can see how those would, like, get in the way.
Yeah.
If you're constantly evaluating, advising, or probing, you're not really letting the person, like, speak their truth.
Right. And he actually shares this amazing story about an executive who is about to lose a major deal.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What happened?
He had tried everything, like all the sales techniques, all the logical arguments, even emotional appeals. Nothing was working.
What did he do?
He finally realized that he hadn't actually listened to the other party. He was so focused on just closing the deal that he didn't understand their concerns and what was motivating them.
It's so easy to do that, to get caught up in your own agenda.
It is. So he changed his approach and he stopped talking and he started really listening.
Oh, wow.
He asked open-ended questions, he reflected back what he heard, and he resisted the urge to jump in with solutions.
And that worked.
It totally changed the game.
Wow.
By giving the other person space, they finally found a solution.
That's a great example of the power of empathic listening. But what about the times when you're dealing with someone who just, like, doesn't want to be understood?
Ooh, good question.
What if they're hostile or just stubborn?
That's when it gets really tricky, and that's something we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, cliffhanger.
We'll unpack Covey's insights on those difficult conversations and those win-win solutions, even when they seem impossible.
Okay, listeners, I don't know about you, but I'm already buzzing with all this win-win and synergy talk. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dig in even deeper and tackle those tough questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork for win-win and synergy, right? It's about character, relationships, clear agreements, and mastering that empathic listening thing.
Right.
But I bet some of you out there are thinking, okay, this sounds amazing in theory, but what about when people just aren't playing the win-win game?
Yeah.
Like, what about those folks who are stuck in that win-lose mindset? How do you deal with that?
I think that is a really crucial point, and Covey doesn't shy away from those situations.
Oh, he doesn't?
He doesn't. He actually says those situations are the true test
Oh, really?
of win-win. Yeah, because it's easy to collaborate when everyone's already on board. But what happens when you meet resistance?
Yeah, I think I'd be tempted to just throw my hands up and be like, forget it. If you want to play dirty, I'm out.
Right.
Would Covey advise that?
He would not.
No?
He would say to lean in even more.
Really?
He emphasizes that in those situations, the relationship actually becomes even more important.
More important.
Yeah.
I would think you'd want to, like, distance yourself from someone who's always trying to one-up you.
I know. It's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But it goes back to that idea of focusing on what you can control, your circle of influence.
Okay.
He says you can still make those deposits, remember?
Oh, yeah, those deposits in the emotional bank account.
On the emotional bank account, even with someone who's really stuck in a win-lose mindset.
Okay, so what would that look like? Let's say you've got a coworker who's super competitive and always trying to, like, steal your ideas.
Yeah.
How do you stay true to win-win without, letting them walk all over you?
Well, I think it's about striking a balance
Okay.
between being assertive and being empathetic.
Okay.
So you can acknowledge their perspective, you
Yeah.
know, like, hey, I get that you're really passionate about this project and want to see it succeed. I feel the same way, but it's also really important to me that, we give credit where it's due and work as a team.
Okay, so you're not ignoring their behavior, but you're also not letting it, like, control you.
Right.
What if they just keep doing it, though? Like, at what point do you say, enough is enough?
Well, Covey does acknowledge that sometimes, you won't be able to reach a win-win agreement.
Okay.
And he says that no deal is always an option.
Really?
It is. You have to know your limits
Okay.
and be willing to walk away.
So it's not about being a doormat in the name of win-win?
No.
Okay.
Win-win doesn't mean you always get what you want,
Right.
but it does mean that you're not settling for something that leaves you feeling resentful.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So no deal is sometimes the answer. What about compromise, though? Does that fit into the win-win framework?
So Covey is actually cautious about compromising too easily.
Oh, really?
He sees it as a lose-lose situation.
A lose-lose.
Yeah, where no one really gets what they want. But he does say there are times when compromise might be the most practical solution.
Okay.
Especially if the relationship is more important than the issue.
Okay, so, like, if your friend wants to try a new restaurant that you're not crazy about, compromising and just going along with it probably won't ruin your life.
Right, exactly.
But if it's like a major life decision, that's when holding out for that win-win becomes more important.
Exactly. It's about knowing when to hold them and when to fold them.
Okay, so let's say we were committed to finding a win-win, though. How do we actually get there? Is there like a step-by-step, or is it more of an art?
Well, Covey actually outlines a 4-step process for win-win agreements.
Okay.
And he drew from the work of Roger Fisher and William Ury.
Oh, yes, I love that book.
Yeah.
So how does he build on that?
Okay, well, the first step is really understand the other person's perspective.
Okay, so that goes back to empathic listening.
Empathic listening, yes. Put yourself in their shoes.
See the world through their eyes.
Exactly. And then the second step is identify the key issues and concerns. And he really emphasizes focusing on interests, not positions.
Interests versus positions. I'm not sure I get the difference.
Okay, well, imagine 2 people arguing over an orange.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
They both want the whole orange, right?
Yeah, classic.
Those are their positions.
Okay.
But if you dig a little deeper, why do you want this orange? You might find out that one person wants the juice and the other person wants the peel.
Oh, I see.
Those are their interests.
So by focusing on interests, you're more likely to find a solution that everyone can get behind.
Right. And that leads to the third step, which is determining what results would actually be a solution for both parties.
Okay, so what does a true win-win outcome look like?
Yeah, exactly. And the fourth step is identify new options to get to those results. This is where synergy really comes into play.
Okay.
So by working together, you leverage each other's strengths, and you can come up with something way better than you could have imagined alone.
It's like you're not just dividing the pie, you're baking a bigger, better pie together.
Yes.
Okay. And Covey emphasizes this process itself. It embodies win-win,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's all about collaboration, respect, that commitment to finding solutions that benefit everyone.
Yes.
I'm feeling really pumped about win-win right now.
You too.
But before we go too far, I want to go back to synergy for a minute. Covey calls it like the highest activity in all life, which is a pretty bold statement.
It is.
What makes it so special?
Well, synergy is about recognizing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Okay.
It's about like harnessing the power of diversity and using different perspectives to create something truly amazing.
I see that in nature, right? Like ecosystems thrive because of like all the different species working together.
Right.
Okay. But I have to admit, I've been in situations that felt like the opposite of synergy,
Yeah.
where like everyone's pulling in different directions. How do we avoid that and create that synergy magic?
Well, Kai believes the key to unlocking synergy is valuing differences.
Okay.
Because a lot of times we try to force conformity, right? Like everyone needs to see things our way.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
I love that saying.
But maybe it should be. If you want to go far and create something truly amazing, go together and embrace your differences.
I love that. You've captured the essence of synergy perfectly.
Did I?
Yeah. Covey actually uses this classic optical illusion.
Yep.
The one with the young woman and the old woman. Do you know that one?
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing because both perceptions are right.
Exactly.
It's just how you're seeing it.
It highlights that fact that we all see the world through our own unique lens, right?
It's shaped by our experience.
Exactly.
So instead of trying to convince everyone to see it our way, we should be curious about those different perspectives.
Absolutely, yeah. And Covey actually shares this really interesting story about a couple who really struggled to communicate because of their different, get this, their different dominant brain hemispheres.
Wow. Dominant brain hemisphere.
I know. You know, there's this theory that the left side of the brain is more analytical and logical, while the right side is more creative and intuitive.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that.
Well, the husband in this couple, he was very left-brained,
Okay.
and the wife was more right-brained.
So they were literally wired to think differently.
I know.
That's wild.
It caused a lot of tension, like especially when it came to decision-making.
Okay, yeah, I can imagine.
The husband, he would approach things very logically, step by step.
Okay.
The wife was more big picture, focused on the emotional part.
So how did they get past that?
Well, it took time, but they eventually learned to appreciate and actually leverage their differences.
Okay.
The husband realized his wife's intuition and emotional intelligence. It helped him see things he wouldn't have seen on his own. And the wife learned to appreciate the clarity and structure of her husband's logical approach.
So they took their differences and made them a strength.
Yes, exactly. And they became more effective as a couple because of it. And Covey argues that that same principle applies to all our interactions, whether it's at work, personal relationships, society as a whole.
That's powerful. It's like diversity is the key to unlocking creativity and growth.
Yes. And Covey says it so beautifully. He says, sameness is not oneness. Oneness is complementariness, not sameness.
That's a good one. Okay, so we've talked about valuing differences, but what about when those differences lead to conflict?
Right.
Like, how do we navigate those situations in a way that's constructive and not, a disaster?
Well, this is where Covey's idea of force field analysis comes in.
Force field analysis. Okay, I'm intrigued. What is that?
So he borrows this idea from Kurt Lewin. Lewin described any level of performance as a state of equilibrium
Equilibrium.
between driving forces and restraining forces.
Driving forces and restraining forces.
Driving forces and restraining forces. Yeah. So think about it like you're trying to move a car that's stalled out.
Yeah.
The driving forces are everything that's pushing you forward, like you pushing the car, other people helping, maybe you're on a hill.
Okay.
The restraining forces are what's holding you back, like the brakes being on, the car being stuck in the mud.
Okay. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it.
So Covey says that in any situation where you're trying to make a change or achieve something, you need to understand those two forces.
Okay.
The driving forces that are moving you towards what you want and the restraining forces that are holding you back.
And I'm guessing a lot of times those restraining forces are people's fears, right? Or their resistance to change, or maybe just plain stubbornness.
Exactly.
So Covey's saying the key to change isn't just about increasing the driving forces, it's about understanding and transforming those restraining forces.
Yes. Because if you just keep pushing harder and harder against those restraining forces, you're just going to create more resistance and more conflict. It's like trying to drive a car with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake.
That's a good way to put it. You're not going to get very far.
You're not going to get anywhere. And Covey actually believes that synergy can help us unfreeze those restraining forces and actually turn them into driving forces.
Really? That's pretty amazing. How do we do that?
So he says to involve everyone in the problem, immerse them in it,
Okay.
so they feel ownership.
So it's about making it our problem, not your problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
As people start to see it as our problem, they become more invested in finding solutions.
It's like shifting from us versus them to we're all in this together.
Exactly. And then as people start to collaborate and brainstorm, new insights emerge.
Okay.
Shared goals get created, and the energy shifts from resistance to momentum.
So if you feel like your voice is being heard, you're more likely to be open to change.
Right. And Covey gives this interesting example from the legal world.
Oh.
He talks about how lawyers often actually make conflict worse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, by focusing on just defending their client's position.
So they're so focused on winning the battle that they lose sight of, like, the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Finding a solution that works for everyone.
Right. It's classic win-lose.
Right.
And it ends up costing everyone time, money, emotional energy.
So what's the alternative?
Well, Covey has found that even in those really adversarial situations, you can still introduce the principles of win-win and synergy.
You can.
Yes. He's helped tons of people in legal battles to move past their stubborn positions, and they've found solutions that really benefit both sides. And these aren't just compromises.
No.
They're often more creative and satisfying than anything they could have come up with on their own.
That's pretty amazing. This makes me think about communication, how important it is for all of this.
It really is. Communication is essential for any relationship.
Yeah.
And Covey actually emphasizes that we need to move beyond just respectful communication.
Okay.
He calls it synergistic communication.
Synergistic communication.
Okay.
All right, what's the difference?
Okay, so think about it this way. Respectful communication is about acknowledging the other person's perspective, even if you disagree.
So like being polite and considerate, avoiding personal attacks.
Exactly. It's kind of like the foundation for healthy communication.
The foundation.
But synergistic communication, it goes a step further. It's
Okay.
about creating something new and better together.
Okay.
Something that wouldn't have been possible if you were just on your own.
So it's not just about understanding each other. It's about using those different perspectives to come up with new ideas and solutions.
Yes. And Covey highlights 3 key ingredients for synergistic communication:
3.
ethos, pathos, and logos.
Oh, yeah. Those ring a bell from, like, my philosophy class. But I'm blanking on what they actually mean.
It's okay. I'll refresh your memory. So ethos is your personal credibility, right? The trust that you inspire.
Okay.
Pathos is aligning with the emotional trust of the other person's communication,
Okay.
connecting with them on a heart level.
Yeah.
And logos is the logic, the reasoning behind your ideas.
So it's not just about having, like, a smart argument. It's about building trust, connecting emotionally, and presenting your ideas in a way that resonates with the other person.
You got it. And Covey shares this really interesting story about an executive who was always successful with his presentations.
Really? What was his secret?
It wasn't because he was a PowerPoint wizard or anything.
Oh, yeah.
It was because he really mastered ethos and pathos.
So he connected with his audience on a deeper level before he even got to his ideas.
Exactly. He understood that people are way more likely to listen to someone they trust and respect.
Someone who seems like they genuinely care.
Yes. It's about the whole package: the character, the empathy, the clear communication.
And when all those things come together, that's when the magic happens.
That's when the magic happens. So we've explored win-win, we've talked about empathic listening and synergy, but there's this one piece I'm curious about. Covey's 7th habit, sharpen the saw. How does that fit into all of this?
You know, that is such a great question. And Covey says that our ability to even think win-win and practice all this depends on our ability to renew ourselves in all 4 dimensions of our nature:
Yeah.
physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional.
So it's not just about mastering the external stuff, it's also about cultivating our inner resources.
Yes, exactly. Covey uses this analogy of a man trying to saw down a tree with a dull saw.
Okay.
He's working hard, but he's not making much progress.
Yeah, he needs to stop and sharpen the saw.
Exactly. But how often do we do that in our own lives,
Yeah.
right? We keep pushing and pushing without taking care of ourselves.
It's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of everything and just like neglect our own well-being.
It is. But Covey says that personal renewal, it's essential for being effective in every area of life.
Yeah.
He actually encourages us to like set aside an hour a day.
An hour a day.
An hour a day for activities that sharpen the saw in all 4 dimensions.
Okay, I have to admit, that sounds like a pretty big commitment. What would that even look like?
It can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. For physical renewal, it could be going for a walk, doing yoga, cooking a healthy meal, or just getting enough sleep.
So just taking care of our bodies.
Exactly, yeah. And for spiritual renewal, it could be spending time in nature, meditating, listening to music that inspires you, or anything that connects you to something bigger than yourself.
What about mental renewal?
That could be reading, writing, learning something new, anything that challenges your mind.
This makes me realize how much I've been neglecting my own mental renewal lately. I used to read all the time, and now I'm just like scrolling social media.
It's so easy to fall into those patterns, right?
Yeah.
But even little steps like reading for 15 minutes before bed make a difference.
Yeah. What about social emotional renewal? That's all about our relationships, practicing empathy, giving back, spending time with loved ones, volunteering, being more present with others.
This reminds me of those deposits in the emotional bank account. Social emotional renewal is all about building those strong relationships.
Yes. Covey believed that our connections with others are one of the most important things in life. And just like anything else, those relationships need to be nurtured.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about Covey's principles, but one question that comes up a lot is, what about when the other person is just not interested in collaborating?
Yeah.
What if they're just so stuck in their ego, they're not going to budge?
That's a great question, and it's something we're going to dive into in part 3 of our deep dive. We'll explore Covey's insights on how to deal with those really tough situations and how to find those win-win outcomes even when it seems impossible.
Ooh, another cliffhanger.
I know.
Listeners, stay tuned for the final part of our journey, where we'll tackle those questions head on and we'll give you the tools you need to create a more win-win world. Brains warmed up. Ready for the final part of our Covey deep dive. We've talked about building that win-win foundation, right? With character, relationships, agreements.
Right.
We've explored empathic listening, synergy,
Yeah.
and we even touched on sharpen the saw, taking care of ourselves so we can show up as our best for others.
Absolutely.
But now we're going to tackle those really tough situations where win-win seems almost impossible. Like what happens when you're dealing with someone who is just stuck in that win-lose mindset? You know, the kind of person who seems determined to get their way, even if it means like stepping on you to do it.
Right. Those are the moments that really test our commitment to all of this. I mean, it's easy to talk about win-win when everyone's getting along.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about when you're facing a real adversary?
Yeah, someone who's playing by a totally different set of rules.
Right. Covey says those situations, they're tough, but they're also incredible opportunities for growth.
Okay.
He actually says that dealing with win-lose is the true test of win-win.
Oh, wow. So like a trial by fire.
Exactly. And he gives some really powerful insights on how to handle those interactions without, compromising yourself.
Okay.
He says even when someone else is coming from that win-lose place, you can still choose to respond with win-win.
Okay, but how do you do that without getting like totally steamrolled? I'm just picturing trying to have a calm conversation with someone who's screaming at me.
It's definitely not easy, and Covey acknowledges that. He talks about staying centered, grounded in your own values, not getting pulled into their drama.
So it's about keeping your cool even when they're trying to like rattle you.
Exactly, and that takes practice, developing your inner strength.
Yeah.
So you can respond calmly, even when provoked.
It's like those martial arts movies where the master stays perfectly still while everyone else is like going crazy around them.
Perfect analogy. And Covey suggests a few things you can do to stay grounded. One is to focus on your circle of influence.
Oh, yeah. We touched on that earlier. What was that again?
It's remembering you can't control other people.
Right.
You can only control your own reactions. So instead of trying to change them, focus on what you can do, how you show up, how you communicate.
Okay, so shifting your focus from what you can't control to what you can.
Exacts.
It's like that saying, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
Yes.
The courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
That's it. Covey also talks about separating the person from the problem.
That sounds interesting. How do you even do that when the person seems like they are the problem?
Well, it's remembering that even people who act badly are still human. They have their own needs, fears, things going on. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean you excuse their behavior,
No, of course not.
but you try to see them as more than just their bad actions.
So, like, having compassion for them, even if you don't like what they're doing.
Exactly. And Covey says that can change the whole conversation.
Okay.
It becomes less of a battle and more of a chance to connect and understand.
That's a big shift. But what if they just won't budge? Like, they're totally against win-win.
Covey says there are times when you just can't reach an agreement, and then no deal is always an option.
So sometimes you walk away.
Yeah, sometimes. It's good to remember that not every decision needs to be a win-win.
Right. We get so caught up in trying to apply these principles to everything that we forget it's okay to have boundaries.
Exactly, you're not a doormat. You're being collaborative, respectful, but also knowing your needs and walking away if it's hurting you.
Okay, so we've got staying grounded, focusing on our circle of influence, separating the person from the problem, and remembering no deal is
Yeah.
okay. Any other tips for dealing with those tough win-lose situations?
Covey says to practice patience.
Patience.
It takes time to build trust and change perspectives. It's not going to happen overnight.
So even when it's uncomfortable, you stay in the conversation.
Yeah, you listen deeper, speak with courage, keep looking for solutions even when it seems impossible.
That sounds really hard when someone's like really pushing your buttons.
It is. Covey talks about digging deep for that strength of character, being proactive, not reactive.
So it's like you're showing them win-win even if they're not choosing it.
Right, and he believes as they see your commitment, they might just start to shift their own view. Maybe not right away, but over time.
It's like be the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly. You have the power to influence things, even if you can't control others.
This has been amazing. We've covered so much from the basics of win-win to dealing with those really tough situations. What are some key takeaways for our listeners as they try to create their own win-win world?
I think the biggest one is that win-win isn't just a technique. It's a way of being,
Yeah.
approaching things with collaboration, respect, and wanting to create something better together.
It's about shifting our mindsets, right?
Yes.
Building those strong relationships. Focusing on creating value for everyone. Remembering we're all in this together and our differences. Those are the things that unlock the really cool possibilities.
And it's a journey. We're going to mess up. We're going to meet those difficult people. But the key is to keep going, keep learning, and never give up on that possibility of a better world.
Beautifully said. And listeners, remember those 4 human endowments Covey talked about: self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and independent will. Those are the things that let us choose win-win, practice empathic listening, and create synergy even when it's hard.
So go out there, try this out, see how these principles work in your life, your relationships, your work. Even small win-wins can create big ripples.
That's a wrap on our Covey Deep Dive. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, stay curious, keep sharpening those mental saws, and keep striving for win-win. We'll be here to support you along the way.